Welcome back to the Crime Documentary Files channel. The sound of the piano, often associated with numerous positive effects on both mental and physical health, has long been considered part of the intellectual essence of humanity. It represents not only beautiful sounds, but also the fusion of art, science, and culture over centuries. However, can you imagine that this very sound could lead to a murder? Today, I will share a fascinating yet tragic story with you. In a residential community in Kanagawa Prefecture, Japan, a man named Ohama Matsuzo lived a life that would take a dark turn. Born in June 1928 in Kodoku, Tokyo, Ohama was the second son in his family. His father, a bookstore manager, and his mother, a homemaker, tried to provide a nurturing environment. As a child, Ohama excelled academically and was even elected class president. Yet, a severe stuttering problem made him the target of mockery among his classmates. Experiences like these during youth can leave a profound impact on one's personality. Consequently, Ohama's demeanor changed drastically. He became shy, avoided social interactions, and preferred isolation. During his first year in middle school, a teacher asked him to read a passage aloud. Nervously, he froze, forgetting the words in the textbook. The laughter from his classmates echoed in his mind, deepening his humiliation and further pushing him into withdrawal. This humiliation led to a strong aversion to reading. As World War II drew to a close in March 1945, most young and middle-aged men were drafted into the workforce. Ohama found himself assigned to a military factory in Yamanashi Prefecture. By 1946, at the age of 18, Ohama began working for the National Railway at a train station. Over the next 3 years, he developed a gambling addiction that spiraled out of control. To repay significant debts, he embezzled 39,000 yen from his company, an amount equivalent to approximately $260 today. The consequences were severe. He received a 12-month prison sentence followed by 3 years of probation. After his dismissal from the National Railway, Ohama returned to his hometown in Yamaguni Prefecture to live with his parents. He oscillated between farming and odd jobs, but boredom soon took hold, leading him to a life of idleness. His lack of ambition drew constant scolding from his older brother. Frustrated and yearning for change, Ohama moved to the Shibashi district of Tokyo, where he found employment. The stressful nature of the job led to debilitating tension headaches, likely stemming from his emotional turmoil. By 1959, at the age of 31, Ohama was introduced through a matchmaker to a wealthy family for marriage. However, his future wife had been previously married and continued her relationship with her ex-husband even after their wedding. This revelation devastated Ohama, who could accept marriage but not infidelity. Summoning all his courage, he chose to end the marriage and received a settlement in return. Following the divorce, he secured a job at a factory in Hachioji, Tokyo, living in a factory dormitory. Each night, the loud music from his younger neighbors grated on his nerves. Although annoyed, Ohama refrained from expressing his frustration, not wanting to ruin his relationships with his coworkers. Over time, though, his sensitivity to sounds intensified. Even the chirping of birds and buzzing of insects became unbearable. Families with children in the dormitory contributed to his growing agitation. Unable to contain his distress, Ohama often resorted to shouting within the confines of the dormitory walls. His neighbors soon labeled him a grumpy, eccentric man. In 1965, Ohama relocated to Kanagawa Prefecture to work at an iron lamp workshop owned by a relative. It was through this connection that he met a woman, and the two eventually married. She was considerate and understood Ohama's sensitivity to sound, making conscious efforts to keep the noise levels at home to a minimum. After their marriage, the couple moved to Kanagawa Prefecture, where they both worked at a factory in Hachioji, Tokyo. Ohama worked in the foundry, while his wife managed the dormitory. The tension within the dormitory simmered, exacerbated by the raucous laughter and playful screams of families with children. For Ohama Matsuzo, the cacophony was unbearable, driving him to the brink of desperation. Unable to endure the disturbances any longer, he erupted in anger, shouting at his neighbors in a futile attempt to reclaim his peace. Known to the other residents as a grumpy, eccentric man, Ohama's reputation preceded him. In 1965, seeking a new beginning, he relocated to Kanagawa Prefecture to work in an iron lamp workshop owned by a relative. It was there, through a fortuitous introduction, that he met a woman who would become his wife. She possessed a deep understanding of Ohama's unique sensitivities, always striving to minimize noise within their home. Her thoughtfulness provided a temporary balm to his restless spirit as they built a life together. After their marriage, the couple settled in Kanagawa Prefecture, where they joined forces at a factory in Hachioji, Tokyo. Ohama toiled in the foundry, while his wife took charge of managing the dormitory, both striving to create a harmonious existence. After their marriage, the couple settled in Kanagawa Prefecture, where they both found employment at a factory in Hachioji, Tokyo. Ohama Matsuzo toiled in the foundry, while his wife managed the factory dormitory. During this period, Ohama's sensitivity to sound escalated dramatically. Even the gentle sound of running water while his wife showered became a source of irritation, leading to troubling instances of domestic violence. Stray dogs roamed near the dormitory, and Ohama found their barking intolerable. In a fit of rage, he took it upon himself to eliminate the dogs. The atmosphere was charged with tension, especially as a group of students residing in the same dormitory played mahjong late into the night. The raucous noises deprived Ohama of precious sleep. As the tension mounted, he reached a breaking point, resigning from his job and seeking refuge elsewhere. In April 1972, Ohama and his wife moved to a housing complex in Hirotsuka City, Kanagawa Prefecture. This expansive community comprised 50 apartment buildings, sheltering approximately 1,300 families. Each building rose 4 stories high, and the Ohama couple took residence on the 4th floor of Building 34, specifically in Unit 406. 2 months post their move, a new family settled into Unit 306, directly beneath them. This family consisted of 4 members: the husband, 32-year-old Okumura, a diligent office worker, his wife, 29-year-old Yako, a dedicated homemaker, and their 2 young daughters. Their daughters were 8-year-old Mayumi and 4-year-old Yoko. At that time, it was customary for newcomers to offer small gifts to their neighbors as a sign of goodwill. Those who failed to do so were often deemed impolite. The Okumura family, however, neglected to greet their neighbors upon moving in, leaving Ohama with a bitter first impression. One of the primary reasons Ohama had chosen this community was its distance from the bustling urban areas. This promised a relatively peaceful environment, yet the poor soundproofing of the residential buildings shattered that illusion. Whenever the Okumura family opened or closed their windows or bathroom doors, the noise reverberated up to the 4th floor. They opened and closed their windows more than 20 times a day, a constant source of agitation for Ohama. In an attempt to block out the noise, he resorted to shutting his doors and laying a thick mattress on the floor. Despite his efforts, the cacophony persisted. On weekends, Okumura indulged in woodworking, his tools clattering as he carved and chiseled, crafting sounds that penetrated Ohama's makeshift sound barriers. Frustrated beyond measure, Ohama descended to confront his neighbors about the unrelenting noise. Initially, his complaints seemed to have an impact, but in time, Okumura began to disregard them. The noise would resume almost immediately after Ohama expressed his concerns, prompting him to raise his voice within his own apartment, further alienating those around him. Whenever Yako encountered Ohama, she treated him with a cold indifference, reinforcing Okumura's belief that his wife had been speaking ill of him to their neighbors, exacerbating the already strained community relations. For over 3 years, the families in Units 306 and 406 endured this hostile environment. Then, in 1973, society began to place greater emphasis on nurturing children's hobbies. A surge in interest for piano lessons prompted many families to invest in pianos for their children. Statistics revealed that 1 in 10 households in Japan acquired a piano during this trend. Families in Ohama's residential community were no exception, as they too bought pianos, generating yet more noise. The sound of a piano, when played, could be quite loud, prompting the community to implement regulations. Residents were only allowed to play the piano during designated hours and were encouraged to keep their windows closed to minimize disturbances to their neighbors. Yet, not everyone adhered to these rules. Occasionally, families permitted their children to play the piano late into the night. Mayumi, the eldest daughter of the Okumura family, was 7 years old and in 2nd grade. Her family invested 260,000 yen, roughly $1,800, in a piano so she could practice at home after school. Ohama, a music lover in his youth, once cherished the melodies that filled the air. Yet the peace they sought was often shattered. Not everyone adhered to the unspoken rules of the dormitory. Occasionally, families would allow their children to play the piano well into the night. Among them was the Okumura family, who had invested heavily in a piano for their eldest daughter, Mayumi, a bright 7-year-old in 2nd grade. Her parents spent 260,000 yen, approximately $1,800, on the instrument, hoping to nurture her talent. Once a music lover himself, Ohama had cherished listening to melodies, but now the sound of the piano became a source of torment. However, after becoming increasingly sensitive to sound, Ohama Matsuzo found no joy in music. Whenever the noise became unbearable, he resorted to wearing headphones to block out the cacophony from outside. Yet, each day, he was tormented by the relentless piano music emanating from the floor below, a sound that plunged him into deep distress. Ohama voiced his frustration several times to the Okumura family about the incessant noise, but each time he returned to his apartment, the music would resume just as loudly as before. On one occasion, when he confronted the family, only young Mayumi was home. With innocent candor, she remarked, "No one who is alive can make no noise, uncle." This seemingly innocuous statement ignited a fury within Ohama. In his troubled mind, he reasoned that if a person is alive, they must create sound, and only in death would that noise cease. Living amidst this constant clamor, Ohama's irritability grew, leading to escalating violence toward his wife, whose patience was wearing thin. As time passed, his mental state deteriorated. He developed paranoid delusions, convinced that his complaints had made the Okumura family so uncomfortable that they had retaliated by purchasing a piano. They played it incessantly, day in and day out. A year slipped by in this torment, and Ohama quit his job, subsisting on a meager unemployment benefit of 7,000 yen each month. Unable to endure the turmoil any longer, his wife filed for divorce and returned to her parents' home. Shortly thereafter, Ohama fell behind on his rent and was warned that eviction would follow if he did not pay by the end of August. With pressures mounting, his chronic migraines resurfaced, accompanied by debilitating symptoms like tinnitus and persistent auditory hallucinations. The relentless noise from below left him incapable of eating or sleeping. In search of solace, he often retreated to the library or sought quietude by the water's edge. Occasionally, he confided in friends that life felt devoid of meaning, expressing a desire to plunge into the sea, but they urged him to reconsider. In August 1974, desperation drove Ohama back to the Okumura household to voice his grievances once more. But upon arriving, he was met with a note on the door that read, "The children are sleeping. Please be quiet." The sight of that note ignited a seething rage within him. To Ohama, it felt like the Okumura family had been making noise without remorse, while he was expected to remain silent. Disturbed by the incessant racket from his neighbors, he posted a notice imploring others to keep quiet so that he might finally find some rest. In that tumultuous time, he felt he had never encountered anyone so selfish. Ohama had already endured multiple psychological blows, including his divorce, unemployment, and looming eviction. The piano's relentless echoes became the final straw, igniting a spark of malicious intent within him. He ventured to a local store to purchase tools for what he had begun to contemplate as a necessary act. Ohama then spent days observing the rhythms of the Okumura family's comings and goings, biding his time for the perfect moment to strike. On August 27, 1974, a new resident, known only as A, moved into Unit 305, adjacent to the Okumura family's Unit 306. After settling in, she brought small gifts and made the rounds to introduce herself to the other residents, including Ohama. Seizing the opportunity, Ohama warned her about the Okumura family, claiming they created noise daily and were selfish for ignoring his repeated complaints. He advised her to steer clear of them, even though his own mind was already consumed by dark intentions. He wavered, attempting to suppress his frustrations, but a pivotal incident would soon push him past his breaking point, culminating in tragedy on Wednesday, August 28, 1974. On that fateful day, the Okumura family's eldest daughter, Mayumi, was on summer break, free from the confines of school. Each morning, she typically began her piano practice at 9 a.m. To escape this noise, Ohama often sought refuge in the library or pursued job opportunities. But on that morning, at 7:05 a.m., while still lost in slumber, the sound of the piano pierced through his dreams, jolting him awake. Fury coursed through him as he imagined that his complaints to the new neighbor had been disclosed, leading the Okumura family to retaliate by commencing their piano practice 2 hours earlier than usual. Rage coursed through Ohama as he recalled his complaints to their new neighbor, A, just the day prior. The thought that the Okumura family was retaliating by starting piano practice 2 hours earlier than usual gnawed at him, feeding his fury. As the weight of his thoughts bore down on him, Ohama Matsuzo reached a breaking point. At 9 in the morning, he noticed that Okumura, the husband, had left for work. This left his wife Yoko and their 2 daughters alone in the home. Seizing the opportunity, Ohama gathered his tools and approached Unit 306. At that moment, Yoko was taking her youngest daughter, Yoko, out to dispose of trash, leaving the door ajar. Inside, Mayumi, their 8-year-old daughter, practiced her piano. Ohama slipped into the apartment unnoticed and swiftly cut the phone line at the entrance, ensuring no one could summon help. He then launched a brutal attack on Mayumi as she played, hiding behind a partition in the room. Moments later, 4-year-old Yoko returned home alone. Spotting her, Ohama pounced, killing her in the same merciless manner. Just a heartbeat later, 33-year-old Yoko returned, and without hesitation, he struck her down as well. All of this unfolded in less than 5 minutes. After committing these heinous acts, Ohama meticulously staged the scene, leaving behind a note that explained his twisted rationale for the murders. With that, he fled the apartment, a dark cloud of horror lingering in the air. In an unexpected twist, he encountered his new neighbor, A, who had moved in just the day before. A looked on in shock and confusion as Ohama, drenched in blood, panicked and bolted downstairs, leaving A alarmed by the sight. Ohama's frantic escape led him to the stairwell, where he collided with A, who was still reeling from the horrifying image of a blood-soaked man. Curiosity and fear danced in A's mind as Ohama fled the scene. An investigator soon entered the Okamura apartment, only to be met with a nightmarish tableau. Horrified, she rushed back outside and called the police, who quickly mobilized and raced to the scene. Inside, the police were confronted with the grim reality. Yoko and her 2 daughters had been brutally murdered. Thanks to a witness's testimony, they soon honed in on Ohama as the prime suspect, but his whereabouts remained a mystery. The police reached out to Ohama's family and friends. One revealed that he had previously voiced a desire to leap into the sea, lamenting that life felt devoid of meaning. In a massive search operation, over 200 officers scoured the nearby coastal areas, yet he remained elusive. After the crime, Ohama fled on a motorcycle to Miyayama Station. Aware that the blood on his clothes was a liability, he stole a stranger's clothing to disguise himself and took a bus to Fujisawa City. From there, he boarded a train to Gunma Prefecture. Unprepared for the escape, he wandered aimlessly, unsure of his destination. In the days that followed, Ohama traversed Kanagawa, Gunma, and Tokyo, evading capture. During his flight, he disposed of the tools used in the murders and found refuge in a parked car along the roadside at night. By August 31st, 1974, the weight of his actions became too much to bear, and he returned to the Hirotsuka police station. In a moment of reckoning, he surrendered and confessed to the full extent of his crimes, revealing the motives behind his horrific actions. This confession led police to recover the discarded tools. Mental health specialists later diagnosed Ohama with a mental illness. On October 28, 1974, 2 months after the tragedy, the case reached the Odawara branch of the Kanagawa Prefecture Court. The core issue at trial revolved around whether the sounds emanating from the Okamura household constituted a nuisance. Prosecutors presented a report detailing sound intensity levels. 1 decibel is nearly inaudible, 20 to 40 decibels equate to a whisper, and 30 to 40 decibels is typical ambient noise. Sounds surpassing 50 decibels can disrupt rest, while those over 60 decibels are deemed very loud. Prolonged exposure to high noise levels can have severe repercussions on the nervous, respiratory, and mental systems. The prosecution's report indicated that the average noise level from piano playing in the Okamura household during the day was between 30 and 40 decibels. When children played nearby, their sounds often masked the piano. At night, the peak noise level of the piano playing reached 44 decibels, a level consistent with normal noise levels for the environment, unlikely to disturb the rest of other residents. The prosecution presented testimony from the residents of Unit 206, situated directly below the Okamura household. They recounted that the sounds emanating from the Okamura family were neither bothersome nor disruptive, falling within a tolerable and comprehensible range. In their closing arguments, prosecutors asserted that despite Ohama Matsuzo's diagnosis of mental illness, he had deliberately, cruelly, and brutally taken the lives of 3 innocent people. They painted a picture of his actions as antisocial, fueled by personal grievances, and called for the ultimate punishment, the death penalty. In response, the defense introduced a witness, Ohama's ex-wife. She offered a different narrative, claiming that the noise from the Okamura household was indeed distressing, particularly highlighting their incessant habit of opening and closing windows over 20 times a day, which disrupted the peace of those around them. The defense contended that the prosecution's sound measurements were flawed, taken while an experienced police officer played the piano and could easily control the volume. They argued that the actual noise levels could have been significantly higher than what was recorded. Throughout the proceedings, Ohama displayed an unsettling lack of remorse, even declaring to the judge, "I want to be sentenced to death" on October 20th, 1975. After a year of deliberation, the presiding judge concluded that Ohama exhibited a total disregard for human life, having killed 3 individuals without a moment's hesitation, and in an extraordinarily brutal fashion, inflicting immense harm upon society. Moreover, throughout the trial, Ohama expressed no regret for his heinous actions. The court ultimately found him guilty of premeditated murder and other serious charges, sentencing him to death upon the announcement of the verdict. Despite his initial lack of desire to appeal, Ohama's defense attorney insisted on pursuing the matter, eventually persuading him to sign the necessary paperwork. Meanwhile, the Japan Noise Victims Association expressed profound sympathy for Ohama. In a surprising twist, they independently filed a petition urging the court to reconsider and reduce his sentence. In May 1976, a second trial commenced at the Tokyo High Court, where the presiding judge requested a thorough reassessment of Ohama's mental state. A psychologist conducted over 10 evaluations, ultimately determining that Ohama suffered from a paranoid disorder at the time of his horrific crimes. Paranoid disorder is a severe mental illness characterized by distorted thoughts and beliefs. Ohama exhibited grandiose and persecution delusions, coupled with a distorted sense of relationships. Based on this psychiatric evaluation, the court held the power to exempt him from the death penalty or potentially acquit him entirely. Yet, on October 5, 1976, Ohama made the shocking decision to withdraw his appeal without prior consultation with his attorney. He expressed a chilling sentiment stating, "If I escape the death penalty or life imprisonment, life will be meaningless. I am exhausted from life due to my sensitivity to noise and insomnia." He concluded that death would be preferable, even if psychiatric evaluations deemed him unfit and he could be spared punishment. "It would mean spending my life in a mental hospital. I hope to be sentenced to death as soon as possible," he lamented. Records indicate that during his detention, Ohama frequently complained about the noise from the neighboring cell. In response to this troubling withdrawal, his defense attorney filed a motion, arguing that Ohama's decision stemmed from his mental disorder and should be deemed invalid. The presiding judge held that even if Ohama managed to evade the death penalty, the prolonged suffering of imprisonment would be unbearable for him, due to his heightened sensitivity to noise and chronic insomnia. Furthermore, in a moment of despair, Ohama lamented that life had become meaningless. His sensitivity to noise and chronic insomnia had drained him of vitality. He concluded that facing the death penalty would be preferable to enduring a life filled with torment, even if his mental health was deemed abnormal and spared him from punishment. He longed to be sentenced to death swiftly, fearing the alternative, a lifetime in a mental hospital, trapped in a cycle of suffering. Records indicate that during his time in detention, Ohama continued to voice his complaints, this time about noise emanating from the neighboring cell. His defense attorney took action, filing a motion that argued Ohama's withdrawal of his appeal should be considered invalid, citing his mental disorder as a condition of duress. The presiding judge pondered the implications, recognizing that even if Ohama evaded the death penalty, his sensitivity to noise and chronic insomnia would render him unable to bear the prolonged suffering of imprisonment. The judge's voice echoed with the weight of understanding, acknowledging the torment that lay ahead for Ohama. The specter of his own mind loomed larger than any prison walls, and the true horror of his existence began to unfold. The judge observed that Ohama Matsuzo had grown so weary of the turmoil in his life that he sought death as a form of relief. In a reluctant conclusion, the court believed the death penalty fulfilled his wish. Despite his troubled mind, Ohama possessed the capacity to understand the legal implications of his situation, including the concept of death. Ultimately, the court upheld the death sentence, sealing the fate of the case. Meanwhile, in Japan, noise-related disputes continued to surface, indicating a deeper societal issue. In October of that same year, 24-year-old Tetsuo Watanabe, residing in Kawasaki City, Kanagawa Prefecture, encountered his own turmoil. His pet dog's incessant barking stirred frustration among the neighbors. Masako Koseki, a 35-year-old bar owner, could no longer bear the noise. One sleepless night, she confronted Tetsuo, reminding him of the building's policy prohibiting pets from disturbing others. What followed was a heated argument that spiraled into violence. In a fit of rage, Masako threw Tetsuo's dog from the 8th floor, a tragic act that ended the life of a beloved pet. The situation escalated to the police station, where Masako was ordered to pay 170,000 yen, approximately 1,160, in compensation to Tetsuo. But this incident would not be the end of the story. One evening, while dining at a food stall, Tetsuo and his wife noticed a cute dog owned by the proprietor. The sight of the dog struck a deep chord within Tetsuo, reminding him of his lost companion. The pain of the loss resurfaced, leading to a dark decision that would alter their lives forever. Upon returning to their apartment, Tetsuo and his wife broke into Masako's home. In a brutal act of vengeance, they fatally attacked her with a knife. During his interrogation, Tetsuo expressed a chilling sentiment. He had loved his dog deeply, viewing it as more than just a pet. He considered it his child. But the story didn't conclude there. The rising frequency of noise-related crimes prompted Japan to enact new laws aimed at addressing these disturbances. Karaoke singing and other loud activities in residential areas became illegal, a desperate attempt to prevent similar confrontations from erupting. The piano industry, too, underwent significant changes. Traditional acoustic pianos were increasingly replaced by digital models, allowing players to practice with headphones, thus sparing neighbors from unwanted noise. Amidst these societal shifts, Ohama Matsuzo now stands as a figure of history. At the age of 97, Ohama remains imprisoned in Tokyo, marking him as the oldest death row inmate in Japan. This tale of desperation, loss, and the far-reaching consequences of noise-related disputes serves as a haunting reminder of the fragile balance between community and individual rights. And thus, we reach the conclusion of today's exploration into the dark corners of human behavior and societal struggles. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Goodbye. This journey through the complexities of human emotions and actions illustrates how deeply personal grievances can escalate into tragic outcomes. Today, Ohama Matsuzo, at 97 years old, remains a symbol of this unsettling reality, imprisoned in the heart of Tokyo. As we close this chapter, we reflect on the ripple effects of noise-related disputes and the changes they catalyzed in Japanese law and society. Thank you for your attention, and until next time, stay safe and aware. Goodbye.